The Flavian emperors needed a building project to rival the great aqueducts and roads built by the previous Julio Claudians, something that would satisfy the public's insatiable appetite for entertainment. But what? The emperor's solution was ambitious and audacious. It would be the largest amphitheater ever seen, an oval structure made of stone, perfectly symmetrical, 3 stories high, and almost 200 meters long. At its center, a circular fountain surrounded by 80 columns. From the outside, the sheer scale of the building was awe-inspiring. Its stands rose tier upon tier to accommodate thousands of spectators. And on the inside, the possibilities were endless. Imagine gladiators fighting ferocious beasts or entire armies clashing in mock battles. Slaves from North Africa racing chariots pulled by teams of horses or elephants. Perhaps a reenactment of the Battle of Actium, where Octavian defeated Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Or even a naval battle on dry land, complete with ships that could be raised and lowered into a giant artificial lake. It could all happen here, under the open sky, in the shadow of the Roman Colosseum. Construction began in 70 AD, shortly after the Emperor Vespasian came to power. He had already suppressed a revolt in Judea and brutally crushed the revolt in the province of Germania. Now he turned his attention to Rome. A team of about 50 architects and engineers worked for 2 years creating detailed plans. Then it was time to get to work. Thousands of slaves were brought in from the provinces and put to work hauling stone, digging foundations, and mixing cement. In total, it took 8 years and the work of an estimated 100,000 slaves to build the Colosseum. Vespasian died before seeing the finished project, but his son, Titus, was there to see the opening games in 88 to inaugurate the new amphitheater. The emperor declared a month-long festival with 100 days of games and public spectacles. It was a huge success. The Colosseum quickly became the center of Roman life, hosting events every day of the week, chariot races on Mondays, wild animal hunts on Tuesdays, executions on Wednesdays, fights between gladiators and criminals on Thursdays, theatrical performances on Fridays, reenactments of famous battles on Saturdays, and free shows for the common people on Sundays. So far, the Colosseum sounds like a tourist's dream, but it was also a nightmare for many. For those condemned to die in the arena, life in Rome was cheap. 2/3 of the population were slaves without rights or privileges, and when they weren't working, they were frequently arrested for minor crimes or no crimes at all, just to swell the ranks of the condemned. As many as 9,000 people were killed in the Colosseum each year, along with hundreds of wild animals captured in hunts throughout the empire. But the crowds loved it. Romans from all walks of life came to watch the shows. The elite gathered in the first ring of seats, close to the action. There were seats for 60,000 spectators in all, though only half of them were actually covered, so most were exposed to the full force of the sun. Not to worry, though. Vendors sold shade. You could buy a parasol to shield yourself from the sun's rays for a small fee. This continued for centuries, until the Middle Ages, when the Colosseum fell into disuse and eventually collapsed. But its spirit lived on in the great cathedrals of Europe, which were built in its shape. And if you visit Rome today, you can still see the outline of the Colosseum on the facades of the buildings that surround it. Or you could take a virtual reality tour to experience it like never before. Click here to learn more. Roman Colosseum, gentle introduction. In setting the scene, the first light of dawn spreads across the city of Rome, washing the ancient streets in a pale golden hue. The air is cool and fresh, carrying with it the faint scent of stone warmed by centuries of sun, mingled with the earthy aroma of cobblestones still damp from the night. As the city stirs to life, the soft murmur of voices and the distant rumble of carts begin to echo between tall, weathered buildings. And there, on the horizon, rising gently above the rooftops, stands the Colosseum. It does not shout for attention, but commands it nonetheless. Its massive, circular frame, though scarred by time, still speaks of grandeur. The morning light catches on the weathered travertine, highlighting shades of ivory, cream, and honey gold. While shadows pool in the vast open arches, you approach slowly, taking each step as though you are walking through time itself. The modern city fades behind you, and in your mind, the Rome of nearly 2,000 years ago begins to appear. The air feels different, filled with the distant roar of a crowd, the call of vendors selling bread and wine, and the clang of metal as gladiators prepare for their matches. This is the Colosseum, known in ancient times as the Flavian Amphitheater. It is more than just a building. It is a monument to ambition, to spectacle, and to the Roman belief that entertainment could be as grand and powerful as empire itself. It is the year 80 CE. The Emperor Titus, son of the great Vespasian, is ready to open this vast arena to the people of Rome. Crowds from every corner of the empire, from North Africa to Gaul, from Greece to Britannia, are gathering to witness the grand inauguration. The streets are alive with anticipation, but here, in the quiet morning before the games, there is only stillness. You walk along the outer wall, your hand brushing against stone that has felt the touch of countless generations. Each block, each archway, is a piece of history, carried from distant quarries, lifted into place by the strength of men and the ingenuity of Roman engineering. The Colosseum is vast, yet harmonious. Its curves are perfect, its proportions balanced. Even in silence, it is a theater of the extraordinary. Soon, in our journey, we will step fully into this world. A Rome where emperors ruled with both iron and bread, where gladiators fought for glory, and where the Colosseum stood as the beating heart of public life. But for now, we stand at its gates, listening to the whispers of history, ready to cross the threshold into another time. Ancient Rome's world, it is the 1st century CE. Rome stands at the height of its power, a city unlike any other in the known world. The empire stretches like an unbroken ring around the Mediterranean, touching 3 continents. From the misty hills of Britannia to the sands of Egypt, from the rugged frontiers of Germania to the sunlit islands of Greece, all roads, it is said, lead here, to Rome. The city itself is alive with contrasts. Grand marble temples rise above crowded streets, and rich senators are carried in curtained litters past barefoot laborers. The scent of fresh bread from bakeries drifts into the alleys, mingling with the sharp temps of smoke from cooking fires. Merchants call out in Latin, Greek, and a dozen other languages, their voices weaving together in the hum of a truly cosmopolitan center. Rome is a city of order and chaos in equal measure. The Senate debates laws within the cool marble halls of the Curia, while just outside, in the bustling forum, traders haggle loudly over amphorae of olive oil and sacks of grain. Water flows constantly from aqueduct-fed fountains, a luxury unknown in most parts of the world. And beneath the city, a complex network of sewers carries away waste, an engineering marvel for its time. But beyond politics and commerce, the heartbeat of Rome is its people. Citizens and non-citizens alike crave entertainment. To the Romans, leisure is not a luxury. It is a vital part of life. Chariot races thunder around the Circus Maximus, theaters stage dramas in both Latin and Greek. And above all, the people love the games, ludi, spectacles of athleticism, drama, and danger. By the mid-1st century CE, these games had outgrown the older, smaller amphitheaters scattered around the city. Rome needed something bigger, something permanent, something worthy of the capital of an empire. And so the vision began, a structure of such size and beauty that it would not only entertain the masses but also stand as a testament to the power and generosity of the emperors who built it, a building that could seat tens of thousands, host events from gladiatorial combat to sea battles, and endure for generations. But to understand why this great monument was built, we must also understand Rome's politics. The emperors of the Flavian dynasty, Vespasian, Titus, and later Domitian, were keenly aware of the Roman principle of panem et circenses, bread in circuses. Feed the people and entertain them, and they will remain loyal. The Colosseum would be the ultimate expression of that philosophy. It was not just an amphitheater. It was a gift to the people, a statement that the emperor ruled not from behind palace walls, but in the open view of the crowd. Here, the ruler and the ruled would share the same spectacle, united in awe. This is the Rome in which the Colosseum would rise, a Rome of power, ambition, and spectacle. The stage was set. The actors, emperors, engineers, builders, and gladiators were ready. And soon, the ground itself would tremble beneath the weight of history. The birth of the Colosseum. It is the year 70 CE. The air in Rome is still heavy with the memory of civil war. Just 2 years earlier, the city had burned under the chaotic reign of Emperor Nero. His lavish spending and eccentric rule had drained the treasury and alienated much of the population. After his death, a bloody struggle for power. The year of the 4 emperors left Rome weary but ready for stability. Stability came in the form of a new dynasty. The Flavians, Vespasian, the seasoned general who had commanded legions in Judea, now wore the laurel crown. His vision for Rome was not one of golden palaces for himself, but of monuments for the people. One of Nero's most infamous projects had been the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a sprawling palace with gardens, artificial lakes, and even a massive statue of himself. To build it, Nero had seized large areas of central Rome, displacing ordinary citizens. It became a symbol of arrogance and excess. Vespasian saw an opportunity, both political and symbolic. He would give back to the people the very land Nero had stolen. Where Nero's private lake had once glimmered, Vespasian would raise a grand amphitheater, open to all. This was not just urban planning. It was a statement. The emperor serves Rome, not the other way around. And so, the project began. The location was ideal. At the heart of the city, near the Roman Forum, and easily accessible from every district. But first, the artificial lake had to be drained and filled. Massive earthworks reshaped the ground. Wooden scaffolding rose into the air as teams of architects and engineers drew up plans unlike anything Rome had seen before. The official name would be the Flavian Amphitheater, in honor of the ruling dynasty. But over time, it would come to be known as the Colosseum, likely inspired by the colossal statue of Nero that once stood nearby. The workforce was immense. Skilled Roman builders directed teams of laborers, stonemasons, and carpenters. Prisoners of war taken during the Jewish revolt were also put to work, hauling heavy stones and mixing mortar. The quarrying began in earnest, with vast blocks of travertine cut and transported from Tivoli, some 20 miles away. Each block was carefully shaped and marked, so it could be slotted into place like a massive puzzle. The foundation was a masterpiece of engineering. Concrete mixed with volcanic ash, poured into deep trenches to create a stable base. Layer by layer, the structure began to rise. Archways and corridors took shape. Each tier was designed for strength and efficiency, distributing the weight evenly across the whole building. Vespasian would not live to see his vision complete. By 79 CE, as the Colosseum neared completion, the emperor died, leaving the final stages to his son, Titus. That same year, disaster struck the empire. Mount Vesuvius erupted, burying Pompeii and Herculaneum in ash. Yet even in the wake of this catastrophe, work continued. In 80 CE, the Colosseum was ready for its grand debut. Titus organized games that lasted an astonishing 100 days. Gladiatorial combats, animal hunts, and theatrical reenactments filled the arena. It was a spectacle unmatched in scale, designed to showcase the might of Rome and the generosity of its ruler. The people of Rome were awestruck. Here was a building that could hold upwards of 50,000 spectators, with entrances so well designed that the entire crowd could enter or leave in minutes. Here was a place where all social classes, from senators to commoners, could witness the same entertainment. The Colosseum was more than just stone and mortar. It was the embodiment of imperial Rome's ambition, a promise that the empire's heart would always beat in rhythm with its people's cheers. Architecture and design. The Colosseum, as it stands today, is a silent giant, weathered, incomplete, yet still magnificent. But in its prime, it was a marvel of precision, symmetry, and function. An engineering triumph that would set the standard for amphitheaters for centuries to come. Imagine standing before it. In the 1st century CE, the sun glints off pale travertine, the clean lines of its arches creating a rhythmic pattern that draws the eye upward. 4 distinct tiers rise toward the sky, each with its own style of columns, a subtle display of Rome's mastery over architectural traditions. On the ground level, sturdy Tuscan columns support wide arches. These are plain, strong, and unadorned, perfect for bearing the immense weight above. The 2nd tier boasts Ionic columns, slightly more elegant, with scroll-like capitals. Above them, the 3rd tier displays Corinthian columns, ornate with acanthus leaves, adding a flourish of refinement. Finally, the 4th level, more a solid wall than open arches, is punctuated by small, square windows and decorated with Corinthian pilasters. From the outside, the Colosseum forms an elliptical shape to 189 meters long, 156 meters wide, and about 48 meters high. This oval design wasn't just for aesthetics. It allowed for perfect sightlines from any seat and created a natural flow for both performers and audiences. Now, step through one of the 80 entrances, called vomitoria, and you find yourself in a vast network of corridors and staircases. These passages are designed with such efficiency that tens of thousands could enter or exit in under 15 minutes. The term vomitoria might sound unpleasant, but it comes from the Latin vomer, meaning to spew forth, a poetic description of how the Colosseum could empty its massive audience with ease. Inside, the seating was a study in Roman social order. The front rows, closest to the action, were reserved for senators and VIPs. Behind them sat the equestrian class, then ordinary male citizens, then foreigners, freedmen, and women at the very top. Each section was clearly marked, and tickets made of pottery shards or bronze tokens told spectators exactly where to sit. Beneath your feet, the arena floor, originally made of wooden planks and covered with sand, hides a labyrinth of chambers and corridors known as the hypogeum. This 2-level underground complex housed gladiators, wild animals, stage machinery, and even trapdoors for sudden, dramatic entrances. Imagine a lion suddenly appearing through a hidden hatch, or a set piece rising from the floor for a battle reenactment. The Colosseum's engineers thought of everything. A retractable awning, the velarium, could be unfurled by sailors from the Roman navy stationed nearby, using ropes, pulleys, and masts anchored around the top tier. They could shield spectators from the blazing sun or sudden rain. Acoustics, too, were carefully considered. The curved walls and tiered seating acted as natural amplifiers, carrying the roars of the crowd and the clash of weapons across the arena. But perhaps the most impressive feature wasn't something you could see. It was the Colosseum's resilience. Built with a combination of travertine blocks, tufa-stone brick-faced concrete, and iron clamps, it was designed to withstand not only the weight of the structure itself, but also the vibrations of stamping feet, the shock of earthquakes, and centuries of wear. Even now, with much of its outer wall gone and stones pilfered for later buildings, the Colosseum remains an architectural icon, proof that Rome didn't just build for the present, it built for eternity. The gladiators and their world, the Colosseum's stones may be cold, but they remember the heat of battle, the adrenaline, the shouts, the thundering heartbeat of Rome's most dangerous performers, the gladiators. To the modern mind, gladiators are often imagined as heroes, champions draped in leather and steel. The truth is more complex. These were men, and sometimes women, who stood at the intersection of brutality and spectacle, pawns in a game of blood and politics. Most gladiators began their journey not by choice, but by fate. Many were slaves, captured in war and brought back to Rome as spoils. Others were criminals, condemned to fight as punishment. Some, however, were volunteers, free men lured by the promise of fame, fortune, and the adoration of the crowd. A victorious gladiator could win not only prizes, but his freedom. Once destined for the arena, a gladiator was sent to a ludus, a gladiator school. The most famous of these was the Ludus Magnus, located just east of the Colosseum. Here, Under the watchful eye of a Lanista trainer and manager, recruits were transformed into warriors. Training was relentless. Wooden swords were used at first to build muscle and hone technique without lethal risk. Fighters drilled daily on footwork, defense, and endurance, learning to use a variety of weapons depending on their assigned combat style. There were many classes of gladiators, each with its own armor, weapons, and tactics. Mamelo, heavily armed, with a large rectangular shield, scutum, and a gladiator short sword. His helmet bore a crest shaped like a fish. Ricciarius, lightly armored, armed with a net riddy and trident, relying on speed and agility. Threx, modeled after Thracian warriors, with a small shield and curved sword. A secutor, a chaser, with a smooth helmet to prevent the net of a Ricciarius from catching. Bestiarius, specialists who fought wild animals, lions, leopards, even crocodiles. Every detail of a gladiator's appearance, from armor to fighting style, was designed to make the fight more dramatic, more contrasting, and more thrilling for the spectators. Life in the ludus was strict. Gladiators lived in barracks, ate a diet surprisingly rich in grains and beans, earning them the nickname horderi, barley men, and were subject to harsh discipline. Yet they also received top-level medical care. A healthy fighter was a profitable investment for his owner. When the day of combat arrived, the gladiators were led into the arena through the Porta Triumphalis, the Gate of Triumph. They would salute the emperor or games organizer with the famous, though possibly apocryphal, phrase, Ave, Imperator, Morituri, Tesa, Hail, Emperor, those who are about to die salute you. The fights were not always to the death, despite popular belief. Many matches ended when one fighter was clearly defeated or wounded. In such moments, the editor, the man in charge of the games, would consult the crowd. With a gesture of the hand, they could signal mercy, missio, or death. For the gladiator, survival meant another day of training, another chance for glory, and perhaps, one day, freedom. Exceptional fighters could be awarded a rudis, a wooden sword symbolizing release from the arena forever. Yet the truth was harsh. Most gladiators lived short, brutal lives. The crowd's cheers could be intoxicating, but they were fickle. The same audience that adored a champion one day could bay for his blood the next. Still, the gladiators' legend endured. In their courage, skill, and spectacle, they embodied the Roman ideal of virtues, manly valor, even if they fought in chains. And for the Colosseum, they were the heart of the show, the reason tens of thousands gathered to watch, cheer, and gasp. The games and spectacle, the Colosseum, wasn't just an arena. It was a stage for the Roman Empire to put on its grandest performance, an all-day festival of blood, power, and pageantry. When Rome hosted Games Ludi, the city buzzed for days beforehand. Vendors sold food, tunics, and souvenirs. Nobles flaunted their finest togas, while common citizens eagerly discussed the matchups as if they were the ancient equivalent of championship games. Attendance was free, a gift from the emperor to keep the people entertained and loyal. A day at the games. The morning began early. As the sun rose over the city, thousands of Romans streamed into the Colosseum, seating themselves according to a rigid social hierarchy. Senators sat closest to the arena, their seats carved in marble. Knights filled the next tier. Citizens and freedmen occupied the upper rows. Women and the poorest citizens were relegated to the very top, far from the action. Trumpets blared. The editor of the games, perhaps the emperor himself, took his seat in the imperial box, a place of honor shaded by the massive velarium awning. The day's program was about to begin. Morning, Venations. The animal hunts. The first spectacle of the day was the Venatio, the animal hunt. From the arena's trapdoors, wild beasts emerged. Lions from Africa, bears from the mountains, elephants, ostriches, even exotic creatures like leopards and crocodiles. Specialized fighters called bestiari battled them with spears, swords, or bows. Sometimes, these were skilled hunters. Other times, they were criminals, condemned to die in the most terrifying way possible. The hunts were more than just slaughter. They were carefully staged dramas, with scenery, props, and even fake landscapes to mimic the animals' native habitats. The audience roared with each kill, marveling at the power of Rome to bring the world's wildest creatures to heel. Midday, public executions. As the sun climbed higher, the atmosphere grew darker. The midday pause, when many might expect rest, was instead the time for Nazi, condemned criminals, to be executed. These executions often took the form of mythological reenactments. A prisoner might be dressed as a figure from legend and then killed in a way mirroring the myth, devoured by beasts, burned, or crushed. To the Romans, this was justice and theater in one. Afternoon, the gladiatorial combats. After the grim interlude, the main event began. Gladiators took the stage. The air was thick with anticipation as pairs of fighters entered through the Porta Triumphalis. Their armor gleamed, their helmets caught the sun, and their weapons were ready. Fights could be one-on-one duels or larger group battles. Some were mismatched by design. A nimble Resiarius versus a heavily armored Secutor, creating a clash of speed and strength. The crowd cheered, booed, and shouted advice to their favorites. The sand beneath the fighters' feet quickly turned crimson. Medical teams, called Medici, waited nearby, ready to treat wounded fighters or carry away the dead through the Porta Libertinaria, the gate of death. Special performances and mock naval battles occasionally. The Colosseum staged events even more elaborate. With the arena floor flooded using an intricate system of aqueducts, mock naval battles, naumachia, could be performed. Ships clashed in miniature seas, while spectators marveled at Rome's engineering might. Other days brought historical reenactments, entire armies in costume, acting out famous Roman victories. These were not merely plays but full-scale recreations, complete with chariots, siege weapons, and pyrotechnics. The end of the day, as the sun dipped low, the games ended. The crowd streamed out, buzzing with excitement, debating the best fights and most dramatic moments. The emperor's generosity had been displayed, Rome's power reaffirmed, and the people's hunger for spectacles satisfied, at least until the next festival. The Colosseum, silent once more, would wait patiently for the next roar of the crowd. Behind the scenes and engineering marvels to most Romans, the Colosseum's magic was in the spectacle they saw from the stands. The gladiators, the exotic beasts, the naval battles. But what they didn't see was just as impressive. A labyrinth of corridors, pulleys, cages, and trapdoors working tirelessly behind the scenes. This was the Hypogeum, the two-story underground complex beneath the arena floor. If the Colosseum was Rome's grand stage, the Hypogeum was the backstage crew, the workshop, and the engine room rolled into one. The Hypogeum, Rome's hidden machine. The Hypogeum was a maze of tunnels, chambers, and holding cells, all made of stone and timber. Here's where the real preparation took place. Animal cages lined the lower level, holding lions, leopards, bears, and more. Sometimes in near total darkness for days before the games. Gladiator waiting rooms were tucked away in corners, where fighters mentally prepared or prayed before stepping into the arena. Storage rooms held weapons, armor, and elaborate stage props. At its peak, this underground network could hold dozens of beasts and hundreds of workers, all perfectly coordinated for the grand performances above. The trapdoor illusion, one of the Colosseum's most awe-inspiring features, was its system of trapdoors and lifts. Using winches, ropes, and counterweights, workers could raise animals or scenery directly into the arena through hidden hatches. Imagine sitting in the crowd, watching the sandy arena floor, when suddenly, with no warning, a massive lion bursts upward from the ground, roaring and lunging at a startled bestiarius. These sudden reveals were a way to surprise the audience and keep the action unpredictable. Rome wasn't just showing off its fighters, it was showing off its stagecraft. The arena floor, a disappearing stage. The original wooden floor of the Colosseum was covered in sand harina, from which the word arena comes. This sand absorbed blood and made it easier to clean up between fights. Beneath that wooden platform, workers moved constantly, resetting props, bringing in new animals, and removing the dead, all without the audience above realizing just how much was happening below their feet. Water battles. Rome's plumbing genius before the hypogeum was built in the later years of the Colosseum. The arena could actually be flooded for mock naval battles. Namachia. Rome's aqueducts fed water into the arena through a network of channels. Small boats were brought in, and staged naval combat took place right where gladiators would later fight. Once the battle ended, the water was drained, the sand floor reinstalled, and the games continued as normal. This engineering trick wasn't used often. Flooding the arena was a massive undertaking. But when it happened, it was the talk of the empire. The Velarium, the Colosseum's giant umbrella. One of the most remarkable features wasn't underground at all. It was above the spectators' heads. The Velarium was a massive canvas awning that shaded the audience from the brutal Roman sun. It was operated by Roman sailors, skilled in handling ropes and sails. The velarium could be extended or retracted, depending on the weather, covering up to 1/3 of the seating area. This wasn't just a comfort feature. It was yet another way to impress the crowd with Rome's ingenuity. Behind-the-scenes crew, the Colosseum needed a small army to run smoothly, stagehands to operate the lifts and trapdoors, beastkeepers to manage and feed dangerous animals, armorers to maintain weapons and armor, cleanup crews to prepare the arena for the next event, medical teams to tend to the wounded. Each person had a role, and timing was everything. If one crew failed, the illusion of the games could crumble. The Colosseum wasn't just a building, it was an entertainment factory, powered by Roman engineering, manpower, and precision. The gladiators, training life and culture. When people think of the Colosseum, they almost always picture gladiators, armored warriors clashing in the golden light, weapons ringing, crowds roaring. But the real story of these fighters is more complex, more human, and often more tragic than the heroic image Rome liked to project. Who were the gladiators? Not all gladiators were the same. In fact, their origins were as varied as the empire itself. Slaves. The majority came from conquered lands, sold into the arena after defeat in battle. Prisoners of war. Captured soldiers who were forced to fight as punishment. Condemned criminals, Nazi sent to die in the games, often with little training. Volunteers octorati. Free men who signed up to fight for money, fame, or debt relief. For a volunteer, becoming a gladiator could be a shortcut to fortune. For a slave, it was often the only way to earn a shot at freedom. The Ludus Gladiator School's training began in the Ludus, specialized gladiator schools scattered across the empire. The most famous, the Ludus Magnus, stood just east of the Colosseum, connected to it by an underground tunnel, so fighters could enter unseen by the public until their moment came. Life in the Ludus was strict, almost monastic. Fighters followed a regimented schedule of physical training, weapons, drills, and diet. They ate a barley-rich diet, so much so that Romans nicknamed them hordearii, barley men. Trainers drilled them in specific fighting styles, depending on their body type, skill level, and armor loadout. Fighting styles and classes. Each gladiator was trained in a specific class, with distinct weapons, armor, and techniques. Some of the most famous included Murmillo, large rectangular shield, scutum and short sword gladius, helmet with a fish-shaped crest, Retiarius, lightly armored, armed with a net and trident, relying on speed and agility. Threx, Thracian, curved sword, Sika, and small shield, fighting with rapid strikes. Sacator, helmet with small eye holes to avoid nets, sword, and shield, specialized in chasing down the Retiarius. These matchups weren't random, they were chosen for maximum drama. A heavily armored Secutor chasing a nimble Retiarius created an unpredictable and exciting fight. The life for a gladiator was a mix of hardship and privilege. On one hand, they lived under strict discipline, with harsh punishments for disobedience. Death was a constant possibility, even in training. On the other hand, they were given high-quality medical care, better than most common Romans received. They could earn money, fame, and fan followings, sometimes even romantic attention from elite women. A successful career could end in freedom, symbolized by receiving a wooden sword, rudis. The spectacle of combat. When gladiators stepped into the Colosseum, The fight wasn't always to the death, at least not officially. If a fighter was badly wounded or overpowered, he could raise his finger to request mercy missio. The editor of the games, often the emperor himself, decided whether to spare or kill the man, sometimes influenced by the crowd's shouts and gestures. But mercy wasn't guaranteed. Many bouts still ended in bloodshed, and the crowd's hunger for drama often sealed a fighter's fate. Fame, fans, and freedom. Some gladiators became true celebrities, their names etched into walls, their likeness painted on pottery. Merchants sold figurines, oil lamps, and even perfume named after popular fighters. If a gladiator survived enough matches, he might be granted freedom and retire, sometimes as a wealthy man, other times as a trainer for the next generation. The price of glory, despite the fame, the truth remained. Gladiators were tools of the empire's entertainment machine. They lived for the cheers of the crowd, but also for the moment when, maybe, they could walk out of the arena as free men. The Colosseum gave them a stage, but it was a dangerous stage, one that demanded blood as the price of applause. The games, ritual, drama, and politics. The Colosseum wasn't just about random fights. Every event was meticulously planned, wrapped in ceremony, and dripping with symbolism. The games were Rome's way of showing off its wealth, its might, and its control over life and death. Opening ceremonies. The games often began with pomp and spectacle. Imagine the sun just rising over the marble stands as the emperor takes his seat, flanked by senators and foreign dignitaries. The morning started with a grand parade pompa, where gladiators marched in full armor, showing off their weapons and saluting the emperor. Exotic animals from all corners of the empire paraded before the crowd. Elephants from Africa, tigers from India, bears from the forests of Europe. Musicians played trumpets and drums, and incense filled the air, giving the scene a strangely sacred feeling. It was part religious ritual, part military parade, and part theater, a reminder that Rome ruled the known world. The morning events, hunts, and executions. Mornings were often devoted to animal hunts. Venetians, trained hunters, bestiarii, faced lions, leopards, and bears in staged hunts. Sometimes animals fought each other, crocodiles against hippos, bulls against tigers. Ingenious stage sets recreated forests, deserts, or mountains inside the arena. After the hunts came the executions. Noxi. Criminals and enemies of the state were killed publicly, sometimes simply, sometimes in elaborate, story-based executions. These could be brutal, being thrown to beasts, forced to fight armed men without weapons, or reenacting myths that ended in death, like Icarus falling from the sky or Hercules burned alive. Midday pause. By midday, the sun blazed high, and the crowd needed a break. Spectators would eat, chat, and sometimes place bets on the afternoon's fights. Vendors sold food and drinks, turning the Colosseum into something like a massive, dangerous picnic. Afternoon, the gladiatorial matches. The real highlight came after lunch. The gladiator duels. The matches followed a loose schedule, but were designed for maximum tension. Popular fighters were often saved for last. Opponents were matched by contrasting fighting styles to make the outcome unpredictable. The crowd roared with each blow, and chants of habit, "He's had it," filled the air when a gladiator was down. When a defeated gladiator requested mercy, the emperor or game's sponsor became the final judge. The famous pollice verso thumb signal was less about up or down, and more about deciding whether to spare or kill. Though history is unclear on exactly which gesture meant what. The emperor's role, the Colosseum, was also a political weapon. By hosting lavish games, emperors showed their generosity and wealth. They reminded citizens of their power. The emperor could decide who lived and who died. The games were a distraction from political troubles, grain shortages, or unpopular taxes. In this way, the Colosseum was Rome's largest propaganda machine. The crowd's power, while the emperor held ultimate authority. The crowd could sway decisions. Loud cheers could save a fighter. Deafening boos could push for an execution. Sometimes the crowd even turned on the emperor, using the games as a rare chance to shout grievances in public. The relationship was a delicate dance. The games were as much about politics as they were about blood. A day's end, by evening, the sand was stained, the crowd exhausted, and the air heavy with the scent of sweat, blood, and incense. Winners left with prize money, losers with scars or nothing at all. The people went home thrilled, entertained, and most importantly, reminded of Rome's greatness. The Colosseum had done its job. It kept the empire's citizens fed, distracted, and loyal, at least for another day. The Colosseum's legacy and modern symbolism, the Roman Colosseum, built nearly 2,000 years ago, was never just a stadium. It was a mirror reflecting Rome's glory, its brutality, and its genius. Even in ruins, it continues to command awe, reminding us of an empire that once ruled the known world. From arena to relic, when the Roman Empire began to crumble, so too did the Colosseum's role as a center for entertainment. By the 6th century, the last recorded gladiatorial combat had taken place. Animal hunts continued for a time, but eventually, the arena fell silent. Earthquakes in the 9th and 14th centuries damaged large sections, leaving the iconic broken outer wall we see today. Over the centuries, the Colosseum served many unexpected purposes. A fortress for powerful Roman families during the Middle Ages. A quarry, stone from its walls was reused to build palaces, churches, and bridges in Rome. A Christian shrine in the 18th century. Pope Benedict XIV declared it a sacred site, honoring the memory of early Christian martyrs believed to have died there. Though historians debate the accuracy of this claim, the Colosseum in the modern age today. The Colosseum stands as one of the world's most visited monuments, drawing millions each year. Tourists walk the very corridors where gladiators once waited for their turn in the arena. From the underground hypogeum to the highest seating tiers, the site offers a tangible connection to the ancient world. It's more than just a tourist attraction. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the new 7 wonders of the world. Its preservation is a constant effort, with teams of historians, architects, and engineers working to protect it from pollution, weather, and the passage of time. A symbol of human nature, the Colosseum forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about humanity. It embodies both artistic achievement and human cruelty. On one hand, it is a masterpiece of engineering, design, and architecture, a triumph of human skill. On the other, it reminds us of a society where mass killings were entertainment, and life could be ended with the turn of a thumb. It's this duality that makes the Colosseum so compelling. It's as a reminder that history is neither purely heroic nor purely savage. It says both. Cultural influence. The Colosseum has inspired countless works of art, literature, and film. Paintings from the Renaissance often depicted it as a romantic ruin. Novels, like Quo Vadis and Ben-Hur, reimagined the spectacles inside its walls. Movies like Gladiator reignited global fascination, shaping how modern audiences imagine ancient Rome. Its oval form has even influenced the design of modern sports arenas. In a way, every football stadium owes something to the Colosseum's blueprint. A stage for modern messages in recent decades, the Colosseum has been lit up at night to promote humanitarian causes. Golden lights when a death sentence is overturned anywhere in the world. Red lighting to honor Christian martyrs and victims of persecution. Blue lighting to mark global initiatives like World Autism Awareness Day. In this way, the Colosseum, once a stage for death, has become a stage for life, unity, and awareness. The eternal echo, standing inside the Colosseum today, you can still hear it, not literally, but in your mind. The murmur of thousands of voices, the trumpet calls, the roar of lions, the clang of steel, the gasp of the crowd. The seats may be empty, but the air feels charged with history. Each stone carries the memory of triumphs, defeats, and the countless untold stories of those who stepped onto its blood-soaked sand. Closing thought. The Colosseum's legacy is not just in what it was, but in what it continues to mean. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of spectacle, a celebration of human creativity, and a bridge between past and present. In the heart of modern Rome, cars rush past, tourists snap selfies, and life goes on. But the Colosseum remains, silent, unshaken, and eternal, a reminder that empires fall, but the stones remember.